Hello darlings, how are you? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. As you can see by the title of this video, it's a very sensitive subject and I have decided to share my story in depth. The reason to that is I have been thinking a lot about this and I feel like I've built a very good little community of people here, and also to help any woman who's going through domestic abuse and any young girl that experienced what I experienced when I was younger, and to really be the voice for those women. I want to talk about the signs, the red flags, and I basically want to help even one person out there. I just want to put a disclaimer: this video is not for sympathy, it's not for attention, and it's not for any negativity. So if there are any comments, I will be deleting and blocking, and if you are watching this with bad intentions, now's your time to leave this video. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I grew up in a Pakistani family. My mum was from Pakistan and my dad was from here, and I basically grew up in a very South Asian community, and that was not very comfortable because this community had a lot of comments, a lot of judgment. They gossiped, they always had an input in every single person's life, and it was just a very uncomfortable community to grow up in. But I had a very, very good early childhood. From what I can remember, I had loving grandparents who absolutely smothered me with love, spoilt me, adored me, and my mum was just the best mum ever. She did everything a mum is supposed to do, like cooked for me, cleaned me, clothed me, and just got me everything I ever wanted. And my dad was a good dad from like what I remember in my early childhood, but I just have such lovely memories of all the people that I grew up with, and I definitely felt loved as a child. So my mum, obviously coming from Pakistan, she didn't speak English, she didn't have any family here or friends here. She basically came to the UK when she was 18 years old, and she'd already had me, so I was 6 months old when I came with her. As a child, do you know what? Not as a child, I'm still the same person that I was as a child. So I've always been a girly girl, I've always been into fashion, beauty, and I've always been really feisty, always said what's on my mind, and I'm still basically the same person. And I just remember like having so much fun in my childhood, and I had amazing siblings. Luckily I had a sister who was younger than me, and I just remember we did a lot together. My mum even dressed us the same. But when I turned 5 years old, I started to witness a lot of physical abuse by my dad towards my mum. And I remember there was this one incident where he was abusing my mum, and I got involved and tried to stop him, and he basically slapped me. And I went to school and there was like a mark or a bruise on my face, I don't remember, but the teachers noticed it and they took me to the office and asked me what had happened, and I basically just innocently said like my dad slapped me. And they then called the social workers, and my mum was called into school, and we basically told them what had happened. But when we went back home, like my dad was obviously aware, and because my mum didn't speak English, she didn't have any family friends here, he basically told her like social services are going to take me and my siblings away from her, they're going to arrest her, they're going to arrest my dad, and basically them two are never going to see us again. And obviously with that knowledge, because my mum doesn't know the law, anything like that, my mum's got really scared, and we basically both went to the social worker and said like everything's fine, it was just one occasion, it was an accident, and that case basically got closed. And then after that, I think we all went on a family holiday to Pakistan and we had an amazing time. And yeah, just growing up from the age of like when I was born, I think up until the age of 10, I just have these amazing happy memories. Obviously not like, I also have a lot of bad memories because I witnessed a lot of abuse towards my mum, and I would always be the child that got her a tissue to wipe her tears, to wipe her blood, and to like, yeah, really like comfort her. And then when I got to the age of 9 years old, I started to realize like this abuse is not normal. I remember there was this one incident, and this, out of all the times I've witnessed my dad abuse my mum, this has really stuck to me, and I've overcome it now, but it was very, very hard for me to overcome this. It was very traumatic. So my mum had basically made vegetable curry, and my dad wanted to eat chicken or meat or whatever, and he came back from work and asked my mum what she had cooked, bearing in mind she was heavily pregnant. She was like 6 months pregnant, I believe, and she was like, oh, I've made vegetable curry, and he goes, I don't want to eat that. And my mum goes, well, I can't cook anything else. And he basically just beat her up, and I witnessed that. And without going into detail, it wasn't really nice with how he beat her up, to the point I was 8 years old and I basically thought that my sister, who my mum was carrying in her stomach, was basically dead. And that has always stuck to me, like it gives me shivers. And I remember it was 3 days in a row, and my mum's basically had so many bruises, her back was broken, and she spent a whole month or two in bed just healing naturally. And as a woman, that still breaks my heart, because no woman should ever have to go through that. So when I turned 9 years old and I started to witness more abuse, obviously because of this was the biggest incident in my life at this point of witnessing physical abuse towards my mum. I started to get really scared and think that one day he's going to kill her. So I went to the social workers, I went to school, and I told them everything. Like, I spoke to them about everything I've witnessed since I was 5 years old. And my dad, being my dad again, basically like told my mum that they're going to take me and my little siblings away from her. I basically got told off and I was in trouble, and he shouted at me, and I went back to school and basically told school that I was lying and none of this had ever happened, and I just made everything up. One thing I will say to anyone, people who have experienced domestic abuse will know where I'm coming from, but when you are living in that environment, you have good days and you have bad days. Like me and my family, like my mum and dad, we went for meals, we went on holidays, we just had so many amazing times together that sometimes the good would outweigh the bad. And because we're in that environment, to us that is normal until we realise it's not normal, if that makes sense. So after 2009, when I was 9 years old, my dad actually made a lot of changes. I don't know what was going on. Actually, I do know what was going on. He fully cut contact with all of his siblings, and without bringing his siblings into this video, because I don't want to speak about them, they were very toxic, and a few of his siblings had a lot to do with the abuse that my mum suffered, and they would just basically come with their wooden spoons and just try to cause chaos in my family. So my mum wasn't abused alone, there was other people involved, which again I don't want to go into, but my dad basically cut his whole family off, and that was the best thing that ever happened to us, because in this period of I think it was 2009 up until 2011, my dad was like the best dad ever. Like, we went on holiday together, my mum had 2 kids at this point, and my dad was just so loving, supportive. He built a whole house for us in Pakistan, and he was just thriving. We were like planning to move out the area that we lived in and buying a new house, and my dad was literally on track, and our family was thriving, and we had I have the best memories with my dad at this point. I actually started to do henna at this point as well, because I was really creative as a child, and I started work, like it was like a side hustle, and I started to do it professionally as well. So on like, it was Eid time in like Ramadan 2011 or something, and I made £95 that night by doing henna. And I remember coming home and telling my mum and dad, like, oh my god, I've made so much money, and I was so happy and over the moon. And I remember my dad giving me an extra £5 to round it up to £100, which made me so happy. And he told me how proud he was of me, and he was honestly like the best dad ever. Like, even my mum and dad at that point were so in love, and we were just in this family bubble, and everything felt perfect up until the point we went to Pakistan. And again, that was amazing. We spent 3 months there and we had the best time. My mum and dad like were in a honeymoon period, and like my mum was in like her most beautiful era as well. She was absolutely glowing. And I remember we stayed, so my dad's parents were alive, and so were my mum's parents. So my mum and dad were not related, by the way. They had an arranged marriage, and they live on 2 different sides of Pakistan basically, and we basically split the time between my dad's family and my mum's family. And then when obviously we were at my dad's side of the family, my dad's my granddad spoke to my dad and said he needs to make amends with his siblings. Obviously that is normal, because as a father you want your children to all get along nicely and, you know, peacefully, so you want to sort of mend anything that's broken. And one thing I will say about my dad's dad, he was an amazing man, and he always stood by my mum and absolutely loved my mum, and him and my mum had such an amazing relationship, and he never once took my dad's side in anything that he was doing. And I've actually witnessed my granddad like beat my dad up after hearing that he abused my mum. Like, my granddad was always there for my mum. And when we came back to England at that point, my dad obviously listened to his dad and made amends with his siblings, which fair enough, but that caused again a lot of problems again in our family. And then my dad started to get abusive again, and then I basically started high school. And obviously I told you at the start, I've always been into fashion, beauty. Like, every time someone asked me when I was a child, what do I want to be? I always said I want to be a model. I always said I wanted to be a fashion designer. I always said anything beauty, fashion, whatever. And I actually have always had a skincare routine since I was 8 years old. And I've always like got up, dressed up, even if I was going nowhere, because obviously my dad was strict. I wasn't allowed to see any friends. I wasn't allowed to have friendships outside of school. I wasn't allowed to basically have a phone or go anywhere. So I spent a lot of my childhood at home, and I spent a lot of my childhood actually helping my mum like bring up my siblings. Like, I remember I started feeding my little sister when I was 6 years old. I was feeding like a baby a bottle of milk, and I started changing nappies and like feeding my younger siblings when I was 9-10 years old. So I was very hands-on with my younger siblings from a very young age, and I started cooking when I was like 11 years old. So luckily I had things to do at home, but obviously no child should have to go through that. Every child deserves a good childhood where they are taken care of and are not being the caregivers. But with my mum's circumstances and her having no family and friends here, obviously as the eldest child, I had to help her, because otherwise my mum had no help. When I started high school, I was basically told to wear the hijab, and I did, and I absolutely loved it. And when I got to like 12-13, my dad would basically like force me to wear Asian clothes and force me to sit a certain way, behave a certain way, and I basically felt like everything I was doing was wrong. Like, I remember once I went outside because my mum had called him to come in and have a cup of tea, and he was speaking to his friend, and I was only like 12 years old, I think, and I went outside and just called him, and then I got in trouble for going outside whilst he was speaking to his friend. So I was getting told off for a lot of things basically. And then he started telling me off for wearing makeup, for I wasn't even dressing a certain way, because obviously my parents were in control of what I'm wearing. I remember this time I was on the school bus and I was wearing the hijab. I was like 12-13 years old, and there was a boy on the bus, and he was very rude to me, and he was being like very sexually rude as well. Obviously he was a little kid himself at that point, but that to me wasn't normal, and I was taken back by it. So I went home and told my dad, thinking that my dad's gonna like, you know, take my side and he's gonna go to school and speak to school or whatever. But my dad turned around and blamed me and said, you must have looked at him a certain way, you must have like instigated that. But I was wearing the hijab, and I never looked at a guy that way at that age, especially. So I was taken back by that I'm wearing the hijab, doing what my dad's telling me to do, behaving the way my dad's telling me to behave, and I'm in trouble for the way someone has spoken to me. Anyway, in 2013, my granddad sadly passed away, my dad's dad, and I knew that our family is really going to break down at this point, because one thing about my granddad, my dad was always scared of him, so there was a limit to what my dad did, and my granddad would always get involved and always have my mum's back. So when he passed away, it's like I knew that my mum was going to start suffering more. And then a year later, my grandma was planning to go to Pakistan to go and see her house and to visit my granddad's grave. So this is my dad's mum. And then my dad was basically told me that I'm going with her because no one can get the time off work, and she's elderly and she can't travel alone. But I knew that there was something more deeper behind this, because my dad's brother was coming to our house a lot. My dad was going to his house a lot, and every time my dad's brother was involved, I just knew that there was a storm cooking up in the background. So I took the police officer's number and I took my head of year's number, and I went to Pakistan. And the day I got there, my dad called me and asked me how was the flight, how was the weather, and I was like, yeah, everything's great. And he basically told me that I'm not coming back till I'm 16 years old and I'm going to get married. And I was like, what? No, I didn't say what. I was basically screaming and crying, and I could hear my mum in the background screaming and crying because it was news to her as well. Anyway, I got off that phone call and I called my head of year and I called the police and I told them what's going on, and luckily they got me back to the UK. But when I came back to the UK, my dad was very strict. Like, he basically forced me to wear the hijab, and when I was on my way to school, like, he would basically like tell me off for like ringing school and the police. I remember him like punching me and slapping me on the way to school, and sometimes I would try avoid sitting in the front, and then he would like basically force me to sit in the front, and I would just go through this like physical abuse all the time, especially on the way to school. And that's when I decided to speak to school and tell the social services, and I knew that I wasn't going to back out, that I was going to stand my ground and not let my dad scare me and my mum and my siblings by telling us we're going to be split apart from each other. So I went to school and I told my head of year that my dad's physically abusive. He abuses my mum. He sent me to Pakistan to get me married because he's abusive, not because it's a cultural thing, but because he is just an abusive, controlling person. My head of year called social services and we had a social worker involved, and my dad got sent to this caring dads program, and it's making me laugh because he would always bring it up in every single argument after this, like, you sent me to this caring dads program. And it was just, it's funny now when I look back at it, but he used it against me a lot. Luckily, because of that, the physical abuse stopped. Like, my dad stopped beating me up, he stopped beating my mum up, and the physical abuse just stopped, because I think he knew that we're getting older now and we're not that, well, I was, to be honest, when I became a teenager, I stopped being scared of my dad. I was always scared of what he's capable of, but I was never scared of him. And I always stood up for my mum, for my siblings, for my family in any way I could. The physical abuse basically stopped at this point. I think I was around 15. And then I turned 16 and he tried to get me married again. This time the guy was from the UK, so I basically said yes, because at least I'm not in a whole different country now. I was basically doing my GCSEs at this point. I was still in school, and I remember there was a lot of talks with like marriage, the ring, the wedding dress, invites, and it was literally stressing me out. And I read a quote on Instagram at the time, and it basically said, in 10 years time, I want to look back to my life and be happy that I didn't settle. And that really stuck to me, because I felt like I was settling. So, and I also had a dream of my granddad. Like, my granddad came and visited me and basically told me not to get married, and he was literally begging me. So I took these two things as a sign to not get married, and I had to build up the courage to tell my dad, because I knew that there was going to be consequences. So I told him I'm not getting married. He beat me up, threw me out of the house, and luckily my mum was like dialing 999, so he brought me back in. And that was the end of that. And then he didn't speak to me for a whole year. Like, me and my dad did not say a word to me. We were living in the same house, not even a word. My mum, being the best mum she was, prom was coming up and she got me my prom dress. She gave me the money to put towards the car me and my friends were getting. And this was the only bit of freedom I ever had, because like I said, I was never allowed to see my friends. But my mum like made all the effort to make sure I attend prom, because it's like a once in a lifetime thing. On the day of prom, he actually locked all the windows and doors so that I couldn't get out, and then my mum had to call him and say she was going to call the police if he didn't come back and open the door and let me go to prom. So even the day of prom was so difficult for me, because I'd experienced something like this, and everyone else I went to school with just carried on as normal, and they were just, you know, having a good day. So when I left school, I decided to do an apprenticeship, because I realised that I don't have financial independence. I also don't have freedom. If I go to uni, I'm not going to have freedom. I'm not going to have financial independence. So the best option for me is to start working. And I started doing a hairdressing apprenticeship. So I was doing that for 6 months. My dad literally went on about it for 6 months, telling me that this is like a low-class job, this is the job that slags do, and just really gave me a hard time for choosing hairdressing. So I left that and I started to do an admin job. At this point, my dad literally didn't speak to me. Like, it'd been a whole year, he hadn't said a word, and any word that he said was always negative. So he stopped physically abusing me, but he started mentally abusing me. He started saying things like, I'm just going to get used and abused, like no man is going to marry me, I'm going to be a slag my whole life. It actually makes me laugh now because I've overcome it, but at the time it wasn't funny. And he just would basically paint out my future for me and tell me who I am. And obviously I started believing it because I'm only 16 years old and he's my dad. And obviously anything your parents tell you, good or bad, you just believe it because they're your parents. So I started believing everything that he was basically telling me that I am. After my admin job, I applied for this door-to-door job and I stayed there for about a year. It was amazing. Not the money, the fact that I got this freedom, because we were always going to different cities to knock on doors and I was selling gas and electricity, and I would like work late hours, and I would it was a good way to avoid my dad. And then basically one of the girls that I worked with, she got fired from the office. So in this job there was loads of offices everywhere in the country. So the girl that I was working with, she got fired from the Leeds office and she moved to the Birmingham one, and I was really close to her, and she basically, when she moved there, she told me like the office is more fun and like it's really nice, and asked me to move with her. So I thought that's the perfect way to get away from my dad. So I decided to move to Birmingham, and I didn't tell my parents. I told my mum a day before I was moving, and I told my dad as I was leaving that I'm moving and not coming back. Because the reason I told my mum a day before, because I knew she would change my mind because she would be really upset, and she was really upset. The reason I didn't tell my dad is obviously because he's abusive, and he would have probably found a way for me not to go to Birmingham, like locked the doors or done something. I lived there for a year and it was honestly one of the best years of my life. I got to be who I am today, basically. I got to experience a life of freedom. I made amazing friends and I had a really decent experience. I also met my best friend Caitlin, who is a very important person in my life, and she kindly invited me to live with her and her family, and me and Caitlin literally just had the best times ever. She's really like a sister to me. And then obviously with me moving, my mum and siblings were still living with my dad, and my mum would often ring me up and let me know how things are going. So she was obviously still being physically abused, financially abused and mentally abused. And then after a year I decided to come back because I spent a lot of my time worrying about my mum. So I decided to come back, which is good because this is like the last year I got to spend with my mum. So I moved in 2018 when I was 18 years old, and I moved back in 2019. And when I moved back, I became a bit of a lioness, and I stopped being scared of my dad because I lived a life of like freedom, and I got to know the law a bit more and my mum's rights and our rights. Also guys, I want to let you know that I am leaving big chunks of details out of this because there were a lot of failures around my mum's murder and around what we experienced as children. So I can't really get into it because there are legal cases going on in the background, and I don't want to jeopardise any of that. But with that being said, I am basically telling you everything at the same time. But in terms of like social services, the police, school and professionals involved, I can't really touch upon that right now. So I don't want you to think like we got no help and we didn't speak to anyone, because we did, but I can't get into it right now. I hope you guys can understand that. Anyway, lockdown comes, and this is where it got really tough. And anyone who knows, anyone who has experienced domestic abuse will know that the best time is when the abuser is out of the house. Like that time is the moment of peace and happiness. Like in that time, my mum would cook, we would sit down, watch movies, like me and my siblings would just have a great time together. And then as soon as you would hear the key in the door turning, like our hearts would start beating, because one thing about abusers is they're unpredictable. Like one day they will walk through the door and be happy, and the next day they will just be like absolutely raging. So my dad was very unpredictable, but the moments they were out, like he was out the house, amazing. Like me and my mum and my siblings would watch movies and we'd just have such a lovely time together. But obviously lockdown happened, he is at home and he is constantly verbally abusing my mum. He didn't physically abuse my mum at that time because I was 20 years old, my sister was 19. All of us have basically got our mums back, and we did not let him physically abuse her. Well, not in front of us anyway. And anytime he would start like an argument in the middle of the night, we would literally wake up and obviously be there for my mum. So he was abusing her a lot verbally. There was a lot of police called to a house in lockdown because we called the police. My mum's dad sadly passed away with a heart attack in July, in COVID time, 2020, in July 2020 when it was locked down. And obviously that is the like most closest person anyone could ever lose. Like as a child, as a daughter, like losing your parent is such a heartbreaking thing to go through. So my mum is obviously heartbroken, and she has gone to Pakistan for my granddad's funeral and to spend time with her family. And she took my brother with her, and me and my siblings were with my dad. And I just remember like my dad saying to me, when your mum comes back from Pakistan, she better not start anything, she better not call the police, because watch what I'm going to do to her. Like no one's going to be able to help her, even you won't be able to help her, the police won't be able to help her. And I was literally thinking like, what is this man talking about? But one thing about me is I never ever like ignored any signs. I always took what my dad said very seriously. And I was basically trying to analyse like what he means by that. And I did ask him, I was like, what do you mean by that? And he was like, you'll see, you will see. And he gave me and my siblings a very hard time when my mum was in Pakistan, without going into it. He wasn't physically abusive, but a lot of verbal, a lot of mental, and a lot of trying to turn us against our mum basically, which obviously we weren't having. Anyway, my mum comes back from Pakistan 2 months later after burying her dad and, you know, the funeral and spending time with her family, which I'm so grateful that she got to do. I remember sitting down with my mum a week before she was murdered, and she'd only been back a week before she was murdered, by the way, guys. So I sat down with my mum and basically filled her in with everything that my dad was basically saying about her. And I said he kept saying that if you basically call the police or like, you know, speak to a professional or do anything or start anything, he's going to do something to you and no one's going to be able to help you. And my mum was basically like, oh, like, you know what he's like he's not going to do anything, we've got the police, like he won't. And I basically said to my mum, like, what if he kills you? And she basically said, like, he would never do that, like he's too scared to do that, he's not capable of that. But deep down I knew he was. So I basically gave my mum an ultimatum, which I still regret till this day. And I basically said to her that I'm not going to speak to her if she continues to speak to him. And I think that the best thing for us to do right now is to run away, like altogether. And my mum basically said that she wants to help my dad because she thinks he's not well and she wants to be there for him and she wants to really like help him be a better person, and she wants to save up and take him to Umrah, which is in Saudi Arabia. So I basically stopped speaking to my mum. I didn't speak to my mum for a whole week, which really makes me sad. And then a day before my mum was murdered, I went to work. I was full of anxiety and I just, yeah, something just didn't sit right with me. And I actually remember I burst out into tears on my desk and I spoke to my manager and I basically said to him, I have this feeling that my dad is going to do something to my mum, but I don't know what it is. And he was like, obviously it sounds very crazy me saying that out loud, and my manager basically said like, everything's okay, like not to panic, he won't do anything. Anyway, I went home that day and my mum actually cooked for my dad, and I think they watched a movie together, or they watched a movie with my siblings, and then we went to sleep. I went to sleep early because I had a migraine that day. All I remember was waking up to police officers like asking me and my siblings to leave the house. And at first I thought it was a nightmare and I was trying to basically like ignore it up until the police officer walked into my room and woke me up and asked me to leave the house. I then went downstairs and there were 2 police officers stood outside my mum's room, and I asked where are my mum and dad. I thought we had been broken into, like I was just woken up, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and I thought we'd just been broken into or something. And I asked where my mum and dad were. The police officers were saying, we don't know. I was going to go in my mum's room, but the police officer basically warned me and said she wouldn't recommend me going into that. Like they were basically holding me back. And I remember the police officer begging me not to go in the room. And I remember her basically saying, you're going to see something you don't want to see. Please don't go in. So I stopped fighting them. And I also thought to myself, like, if my dad's done what I think he's done, that means I need to step up and care for my siblings. So I don't want to see something that's going to scar me and traumatize me for life. And all this was like quick thinking, by the way, guys. So I went downstairs, picked my little sister up, we sat in the police van, and there were just sirens everywhere. The whole neighborhood was out, and I basically looked up to the sky and basically said, like, God, whatever it is, like, please not now. Like, please don't make this the day where you take my mum. And then 10 minutes later, the police officer came up to me and he asked me to step out the car. And I basically said no. And I said, you are part of the reason why this has happened to my mum. So you're going to be the one to break the news to my family. I'm not going to be the bearer of the bad news. And he basically said, I'm sorry, but your mum's passed away. And then after that, me and my siblings headed down to the police station, and we were in the police station for like 12 hours. And then my dad's sister, who we have not seen for 7 years, comes and saves us. And then she gives us a hard time whilst living with her. But anyway, not going to get into that. Basically, my dad had murdered my mum in her sleep with a knife and a hammer, and we didn't hear a thing. Like, we did not hear a thing, which brings me so much peace, actually, because it shows me that my mum didn't feel any pain. Because when my dad would normally be abusive, we'd always hear my mum scream or like shout for us or something, but we didn't hear anything that night. And after my dad did what he did, he basically called the police and admitted to what he did and asked them to come to the property before we wake up, because he doesn't want us to see my mum's body. We stayed with my dad's sister for a few weeks, and there was a lot of things going on in that time. And obviously I was only 20, my siblings were very young. My youngest sister was 6 actually. We were very fragile, we were traumatized, and we were going through a very, very, very hard period of our life, and my dad's family didn't make it easier. And there was conversations going on with who's going to foster my siblings, who's going to be the carer. And at first, one person wanted to look after them, and then the person turned around and said, I can't do it. Then 2 were going to be placed here, and 2 were going to be placed there, and 1 was going to be here. And that literally, like, it still hurts my head even thinking about that conversation happening right in front of me. So I just got involved in that conversation and said, I want to take care of my siblings. Like, I will look after them. They're my siblings. We come from one mother, and she kept us together, and no one's about to split us up. And since that day, me and my siblings have been together, and it's been 5 years since I've been caring for them, and it's the best thing that ever could have happened to us in the circumstances that we were in. And after listening to my story, if you're someone that's been abused, experienced abuse, or you have gone through something so traumatic, I just want you to know that life is worth living. And leaving your abuser might sound difficult at the start because you're so used to the life with him or her, but I promise you, life will get better as soon as you accept that you deserve better and you take that brave step to leave. No matter who that person is, whether that's your dad, whether that's your brother, whether that's your partner, whether that's I don't care who it is. Abuse is not normal and it's unacceptable, and the abusers actually need help. So please do not be a victim, and please become a survivor, because your future self will thank you, and you deserve to live, you deserve to be loved, you deserve to be cared for. A man putting his hands on a woman is not normal. A man saying horrible things verbally is not normal. A man creating scenarios in a woman's head or a child's head, that is mental abuse. It is not normal. And I honestly beg you to leave these people and be brave enough to speak up for yourself and get the help that you need. My dad was not a monster every single day. Neither was he abusive every single day. I did have a feeling that he would do what he did, but it was hard for me to accept it. And the signs were always there. We just chose to look for the best in him, because that's what we do as children, that's what we do as partners. We try to look for the best in the people that we love. But in situations like abuse, we need to focus on the abuse, and we need to focus on what's more important, and that is our lives, and that is our future, and that is our children. My mum did the best that she could, and she actually didn't want to be with my dad. She was actually ready to leave him like 6, 7, 8 years before she was murdered, but she didn't get the help that she deserved. But in the past years, since she has been murdered, since so many women have been murdered by their husbands, there is a lot more support. People like me have contributed to making sure you women get that support, so please take advantage of it and make the most out of it, because it is there for you. There are charities like Nirvana. The police are a lot more trained in domestic abuse. Like, you will be heard. I don't want to end this video on a bad note or a negative note, so I want to pay a little tribute to my mum, and I also want to describe the person that she was and still is. And I've actually written it in my notes because I wanted to be prepared. So my mother was the definition of the most perfect mum. She cooked the most amazing dishes from scratch. She spent quality time with all 7 of her children, motivating us to become the best versions of ourselves and to create beautiful futures for ourselves. My mother was very charitable. She gave with an open fist. She was humble enough not to just feel sorry for the orphans, poor and needy, but to actually get down on her knees and feel their level of pain and suffering. She was hostess with the mostess. She honoured every single guest that came through our door, and most importantly, she was the perfect wife, the one every man dreams of. In her soft feminine energy, she took care of herself by eating healthy foods. Even after 7 children, she was never out of shape. She had a home workout routine. She went for walks. She also dressed up every single day wearing the most beautiful colours, prints and materials, and she really took pride in what she wore. She looked after her outfits to the point they still look brand new even after years of owning them. She never once had a bad smell. Daily showers, clean environments, and she wore perfume strong enough to linger but not strong enough to give anyone a headache. She always had beautiful glowy skin, which was a reflection of the foods she ate, drinking enough water and getting enough sleep, of course, when that wasn't disturbed by my dad abusing her. She always wore her smile, and she is still remembered for her beautiful smile. She was very religious. I still haven't met anyone that loves God as much as she did. She was always in a state of worship through her words, actions and daily habits. There's only one place for women like her, and that is a place in heaven. Gardens underneath which rivers flow, the smell of musk, and of course, surrounded by the beautiful light of our beautiful Lord. All praise to the Almighty for giving my beautiful mother a place like that to be in forever. Dear Allah, thank you for giving my mum the honour that she deserves. This lifetime isn't enough for me to thank you and to praise you for your love and mercy, but I hope I get to meet you one day and to enter your heaven. Not because I deserve it, but because I still praise you even after you took everything from me. Thank you for watching, guys.